Okay, I'll try to make it quick for a Friday afternoon as well. But the topic I'm presenting on today is the science of wine and how the chemical compounds in wine affects its flavor profile. Okay, so first things, when we talk about what makes one wine taste different from another, it often starts with the grapes. And so just how apples have different variations affecting its sweetness, different grape varieties also have different flavors, textures, as well as chemical compositions. But it's not just the grape variety that matters. Where it's grown also plays an important role as well. That brings us to the concept of that winemakers love to talk about, which is terroir. And please excuse my French accent throughout this entire presentation. The last time I've taken a French class must be almost like years ago. But basically, this French term loosely translates to the sense of place, and it captures the unique combination of soil, climate, as well as topography, and how that shapes how the grapes are grown. So to break it down, soil affects the water drainage as well as nutrient availability. Chalkier soils might lead to grapes with higher acidity, while volcanic soils can intensify the minerality within the wine. Climate controls how fast grapes ripen. What we often see that cooler temperatures often yield grapes with higher acidity and lower sugar content, while as warmer climates is the opposite. It tends to boost the sugar content and leads to bolder as well as higher alcohol wines. Topography refers to the elevation as well as the slope direction, which can impact the sunlight exposure as well as just overall temperature regulation. And even small differences in these can affect the grape's flavor profile. In short, terroir is why wine from one place can taste different from another, even though they might be made from the same type of grape. You can think of it as nature's fingerprint and how it sets the stage for everything that follows in the winemaking process. These two concepts brings us to how grapes are actually named. So we often divide the world up into two different categories. The old world referring to traditional wine producing regions like France, Italy, Spain, and Germany, usually around the Mediterranean regions. Whereas the New World refers to basically the rest of the world that also makes wine, and this can be regions like the US, Canada, Australia, Southern Africa, etc. In the old world countries, wine is usually named after the place it comes from, not the grape. The idea here is that the soil, temperature, and topography is more important than the grape itself. This is because traditional wineries are usually family-run businesses and have been passed down through generations. And so these families tend to take pride in their land as well as their winemaking traditions. And so there's a cultural emphasis on preserving heritage. The best example of this is champagne, which I recently learned. Champagne is actually not the name of a grape or a style of wine. It's actually the name of a place, which is a very specific region in northern eastern France. And only wine from this region can be technically called champagne. All other sparkling wines are only just sparkling. In the New World, wine is usually labeled by the type of grape. You'll see bottles that clearly say the grape variety, like this one right here will say Cabernet Sauvignon, and then sometimes followed by the region, in this case, Napa Valley. This reflects a different philosophy, one that emphasizes industrialization to an extent, but also just overall production quantity and less focus on the heritage. The New World wines also have fewer restrictions and more freedom in blending and labeling, so you might be able to see some innovations in this sense as well. Arguably the most important step in order to turn grapes into wine, they undergo a process called primary alcoholic fermentation. At its core, primary fermentation is a biochemical reaction where yeasts consume the sugars in the grape juice and then converts them into alcohol, carbon dioxide, as well as heat. But it's not actually just alcohol that's being formed. During fermentation, yeasts also produce hundreds of secondary compounds, things like esters, aldehydes, as well as higher alcohols that can give wine its distinct fruity, floral, as well as spicy aromas. Optional secondary fermentations can also be performed by other organisms, and there's many types of these. But before that, let's take a look at how different wines are processed or handled before the fermentation process. So these are the main categories of wines, and obviously there's more, but here are the main ones we're going to be focusing on. In red wine, fermentation happens with the grape skin and the seeds. This allows for the extraction of the color as well as the flavor, and it's usually done at warmer temperatures to enhance the structure of the wine. In white wine, on the other hand, it's typically fermented without the skins at all. The juices are pressed off first and then fermented at a cooler temperature to preserve its delicate aromas as well as acidity. Rosé is a bit of a hybrid. It's made from red grapes, but only with a short period of skin contact before fermentation, giving it that pinkish, blushy color as well as a lighter, fresher profile. Sparkling wines undergo an optional secondary fermentation. So after the first fermentation makes the base wine, and this can be any type of wine like red, white, rosé, or others, winemakers then add more sugar and yeast in, creating carbon dioxide that then gets trapped, forming those bubbles. So the secondary chemicals can be formed during the fermentation process, but can also form after the fermentation when the wine is stored and aged as well. In fact, there's actually lots of chemistry that continues to happen within the bottle. And aside from the obvious sugars and acid content, color, aroma, as well as aging are all a result of the chemicals inside the wine. So the first group that we're going to take a look at is the phenolics. These are a group of naturally occurring compounds found in the grape skin, seeds, as well as stem. And because red wine are fermented with all these components included, red wine will have a higher concentration of these chemicals compared to something like a white wine. So the first key group is tannins. They give red wine its drying, astringent kind of sensation, similar to what you would get with an oversteeped tea. Tannins will bind the proteins in your saliva, which is why they make your mouth feel dry. And then there's anthocyanins, which are the pigments responsible for the red, purple, and even the blue hues in red wine. This compound changes color depending on pH, with red and purple being the most common in wine since that's the color associated or expressed at lower pHs. But anthocyanins can also interact with tannins and oxygens as the wine ages, gradually changing the subtle hues in the wine from like a bright red ruby color to more of like a brick brown tone. Other flavonoids also exist in wine, which contributes to its taste as well. And there's tons of examples of these, and some of them are known for their antioxidant properties, although there are some controversies in the literature related to this. Next group I wanted to talk about is the aromatics, where a lot of wine's complexity comes from. Most of these scents are from esters as well as other aromatic compounds, which are produced during the fermentation process. And depending on the type of grape or the fermentation conditions, these can give a rise to a wide range of notes. So esters particularly are known for their fruity aromas. Terpenins are known for their floral as well as spices. And then finally, thiols contribute to the more tropical as well as exotic flavors like passion fruit and grapefruit. Final important thing is aging, which adds another layer of chemistry to the mix. In barrel aging, which is the more traditional method, wine undergoes subtle oxidation while also absorbing compounds from the oak wood itself, things like vanillin, which gives vanilla notes, as well as lactones, which contributes to the toasty, coconut-like aroma. Bottle aging, on the other hand, happens in mostly a closed system with limited oxygen. Over time, wine continues to evolve, and tannins will become less pungent and soften, flavors will integrate, as well as new aromas can emerge, things like earthy, nutty, or even leathery tones. Aging also involves slow oxidation reactions that can either improve or degrade a wine, depending on how well it's made and stored. And that's why some wines are meant to be enjoyed young, whereas others are built to last decades. So to bring everything together, I thought we should explore a few different types of wines and break down their body, aroma, taste, and color, and then most importantly, maybe pinpoint some of the chemicals that give rise to those features. So the first one we will look at is Sauvignon Blanc. This wine has a pale and greenish color due to the low anthocyanin content since it's made from a white grape with minimal skin contact. It smells very tropical, so think of things like gooseberry, passion fruit, as well as like fresh cut grass. And these aromas come from the volatile thiols like 3-metavohexanoate as well as 3-mercaptohexylacetate, along with methoxypyrazine, which creates that green vegetal note. In terms of taste, Malic acid contributes to the tart green apple sensation, which makes this wine very crisp and high acidity. This wine is also considered low-bodied, means that it's more refreshing and clean on the palate because of its low alcohol and glycerol content. The term body in wine refers to how it makes the mouth feel when you drink it. An analogy you can think of to put this into perspective is skim milk versus whole milk or even cream. In the end, they're all dairy products and are milk, but the fat content changes how heavy or viscous the milk feels in your mouth. This is very much the same thing that happens with wine. Lighter bodied wines are said to be paired well with lighter dishes as well. So salads, seafoods, poultry, or lean protein in general. The next wine is Pinot Noir. This wine has a light ruby red color from the anthocyanins, but it has relatively low concentrations of this compared to some of the deeper reds. It smells like red cherries, earthy mushroom, as well as a hint of rose or other floral scents. The fruity notes the fruity notes are due to esters like ethyl acetate and ethyl hexanate, while the earthy tones come from compounds like geosmin, which is described as the smell of soil after rain, as well as 2-methoxy-3-isobutyryl. The taste is very delicate. Um, it has a very smooth tannin taste, as well as bright acidity. And the acidity is driven by tartaric acid and malic acid, giving it a very lively finish. This wine would also be considered light to medium bodied, meaning that it could pair well with richer meats such as a fatty fish, like salmon or duck. The other wine is Cabernet Sauvignon, which has a very deep, opaque purple color. It, the smell is described as black currant, green bell pepper, vanilla, and cedar. The fruity notes again comes from the ester compounds, and the green pepper aroma is from methoxypyrazine, while the vanilla and spices come from the oak wood aging process, like we discussed earlier, specifically the vanillin as well as oak lactones. This wine is considered full-bodied with a high alcohol content and very firm tannin, which gives it more weight and more of a mouth coating texture and experience. This wine also undergoes a secondary fermentation process known as malolactic fermentation, which converts the malic acid associated with the sourness to a more smooth and creamy lactic acid. A full-bodied wine like this is said to pair well with red meats like steak. Lastly, before I end, I thought I should give credit to FoodDB. So I use FoodDB to help me research some of these compounds. And for those that may not know, it's a database that's created by the lab and contains information on the chemical compounds of foods, including the nutrients, flavor compounds, um, the aroma molecules, as well as bioactive substances. It's been very helpful finding primary sources on the chemicals as well as their role in wine tasting. And here are the other sources that I used. Thank you.